Hi. First off, I'm so sorry, I just got back from the gym, so I look like this, but I actually was not intending at all to film this video today, but I decided that I would do it. I had a few ideas and I kind of wanted to do at least one of them, so here we are. Also, I had this idea of talking about being an art major, essentially, and I had another idea of how I eventually decided on my major, because I think that it's a little bit different to finally decide on doing art as a major, especially like, you know, people will tell you all the time that it's not going to make money and all that kind of stuff. So I figured I would also talk a little bit about in maybe a different video of like how I finally decided on that and all the like steps I got to it, basically. But in this video, I'm specifically going to talk about what it was like being an art major. If you don't already know, I majored in sculpture. I went to the University of Washington, and yeah, I'm from San Diego, so it was quite the change for me, but I really, really loved it, and I don't think I would change my experience for anything. So yeah, I can talk specifics about my experience, I guess, but to start off, first off, my school has a few different majors. We have like the art school, and then inside of the art school there are different majors. So there's like the design majors and things like that. So what it says on my paperwork is interdisciplinary visual arts, or IVA, but what I studied when I was in school was three-dimensional form, or 3D4M is how they like abbreviate it. There were some issues, and again, I can talk more about my experience in my major specifically, because that's a whole story in itself that sometimes makes me want to cry, but I can talk about that if you guys want to hear about it. But basically, last minute, my advisor emailed me and was like, hey, there's a way for you to switch majors and graduate early. So I ended up doing that, because if you haven't watched that video, I will link it down below. But basically, I went traveling for a little while, and that kind of pushed me back. So I ended up taking a summer quarter so that I could stay within the 4 years. I personally really wanted to stay within 4 years just because I had crazy student loans and things like that. So yeah, I decided to try to like do my best and get everything done in the 4 years. But because I had done that and I got done with all of my credits, I actually, by switching majors, was able to graduate early and not have to deal with all of the stuff that was happening in my major. So that's why I technically studied 3D4M, but on my paperwork it says IVA. Either way, they're both art majors. The biggest difference between them is that IVA is interdisciplinary visual arts, so basically it could be really anything that you want. Things like drawing and painting, printmaking, things like that fall into that category. And so it was always like IVA with a concentration in blank. With 3D4M, it's specifically sculpture, essentially, so it's more 3D art, and it was wood, metal, glass, and ceramics. And there were some other types of things that you could do with it, so like performance pieces and things like that. So I definitely did do a performance piece before, but my main concentration and what I really loved to do was ceramics, although I loved learning about metal and wood. I never touched glass, and I'm kind of bummed that I didn't, just because we had everything there, but it kind of terrified me, and it was like a very small group of people that were like allowed to do it, even though technically anyone could. My instructors were weird, and they were like very like closed off about what, like, who they let into like a club, basically. It felt like a club, at least. So I never did glass, but mostly ceramics with metal and wood. So a few things that I would say that I took away from being an art major. First off, I again would not change my experience for anything, although I had really bad experiences at times. I also had really great ones. It was really cool not having to have like formal finals, because my first year I remember studying for all those finals, and I just like was not having a great time because I'm not good at studying. So it was cool to be able to have a project to present instead, which was just as stressful. So it's not that it's any easier, it's just that the way that my mind works, it made it better for me. Basically, the way that all my classes worked was that they were studio classes. And so what that means is you have a studio space and you make a project, and that was that. So it was a little bit more complicated than that, but for like, to make it easier, I'm just going to explain it that way. So the first thing that I really learned was that you have to be really, really self-driven. It was not something where you would just be able to go to class and go home and that was it. Like, you had to put in at least 60 hours a week into your studio time outside of class time. Classes were like 3 hours long, multiple times per week. So it was like having a full-time job, really. And I guess that's what school is in general, but that was only for one class. And so when you were taking multiple classes, it made it kind of difficult because you weren't allowed to mix your projects together, like present your project for multiple classes. It was, you had to have a different project for each class. So I remember having so many days where I would stay in my studio until like 3 a.m. Because I needed to do my projects. I also personally had a job when I was in school, so it made it a little bit more difficult to commit so much time. But I really loved it again, so I did not mind it. But you do have to be very self-driven. I think something else that I learned pretty early on in a few of my first classes, if not the first class, was that you're going to cry a lot. And I know that that sounds like, oh, maybe you're just too emotional, but even like, I don't know anybody who didn't cry in my major. And I think it's just because you have to be so vulnerable and you put so much of your effort into something and you're spending so many hours, and the critiques are not easy. So it's just difficult when you spend so much time on something and then people still tell you that you did it wrong. And it's all subjective at the same time, so there's no way for them to tell you that it's wrong. But I guess that's also the point of a critique, is that they're supposed to tell you what they think that you could improve on. But the way I think that my instructors did it was not the best, and so it made you very emotional, and it was difficult, realistically speaking, especially in your first few classes where they expect you to have these like critiques and they critique you so harshly, and it's your first time seeing that and you take it very personally. So towards the end, I think that you learn that it's not a personal thing and you can actually choose which pieces of that critique you actually take to heart and change in your piece, because your piece is never finished, really. But yeah, that I mean, realistically speaking, it's a very emotional major. It's not like in, I don't know, chemistry where like you do the exam and then if you fail, you fail, and you pass, you pass. It's, I don't know. We were graded on how many risks we take, and that's how my school did it, but other schools do it differently. So I think that leads into my next part, which is you have to be okay with being vulnerable. And that was something that was also harder for me to learn. I think being vulnerable is okay, and also sometimes people are still not going to accept it. So in my major, we all were supposed to have solo shows, and my solo show, along with a couple other students, actually got taken away. I'm not really sure on the actual reasons why, but my reasoning that I was given was that my project was about mental health, and the instructors basically said that they didn't know how to critique my work if I was going to talk about mental health, because they didn't want to be offensive to anybody. But at the same time, it felt like I was hushed and that I couldn't talk about mental health in this space, which really bummed me out, because I thought that this was a really great space to talk about it. I think that a lot of people experienced it, and at one point or another, I think almost everybody felt a little down or depressed, and I think that that was very normal for a lot of us, which is very sad to say, but I think that's kind of what like linked us all together in a way, and like allowed us to understand each other's art too. So yeah, that's just to say that, again, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be okay with opening up to people, because your art is not going to be good if it's just a sunflower every single time and there's no like meat behind it. I don't know a better way to say that, but there needs to be like more depth behind what you're building, I suppose, and that just comes with vulnerability and opening up, even if it's a weird hidden message of it. So yeah. And then back to critiques a little bit. I think something that that took me a really long time to understand was that it's okay to disagree with your professors. And I think that's something else that's really unique to art, is that with a lot of other majors, the professor knows best and there's formulas and calculations that you have to do. And in art, it's again all subjective. So it's okay for your instructor to say, I think that you should have done it this way. And then you can say, I want to disagree with your opinion. I think I did it the right way. That's not to say that you shouldn't actually listen to what your professor says, because they probably are saying that for a reason. And maybe you should consider it. Like if they said that something should have been blue, then consider why they said that and maybe try out some other colors, not just the color that you used or blue, just anything. So yeah, that's a really bad example, but I just want to give an example in there. So yeah, it's okay to disagree with your professors. It's okay to like push the boundaries in that area, because the professors, although they are professors, they're more like mentors in that area of like schooling, I guess. So it's interesting how you can use them that way and push that boundary, have conversation about something rather than just listening to what they say in lecture and like regurgitating the information essentially. I think another thing that kind of goes along with that too is that just because you don't have a good critique, it doesn't mean that you can't find the information useful. And I guess what I mean by that is that like it might be emotional, it might be something that you just completely disagree with all of the points that someone made or whatever it might be, but that doesn't mean that that information cannot be used and again then tweaked so then it makes more sense to you. Or maybe like someone brought up, I don't think that you should have done X thing, and maybe you really liked that thing, but maybe you can see how it can change to affect other people in a different way. I think part of art is that you want to affect other people, and if they don't understand it the way that you put it out on your piece, then it's just not working. And so it's useful to take the information that people are giving you and figure out how to affect the people the way that you want to. If you try to make something that's maybe really happy, but someone sees that really sad, then that's obviously not translating correctly to that person. And it's not to say that every single person is going to understand your art, but it's maybe better to listen to what a couple of people have said so that you can make sure that for the majority of people, it comes across the right way. I think something else is that you just have to learn to be okay with critiques, and that goes hand in hand with vulnerability and just like knowing that you're going to get emotional and those kinds of things. I think it's also useful for future. I've used so much of what I've learned in my art school in real life versus what I learned in like high school or in some of my first few classes. I don't really use that information as much, and people always joke about that, about like, you don't actually use what you learned in school. I feel like I personally do, even though it was like ceramics or woodworking or whatever. I feel like so many more of those skills translate for me, and critiquing is one of them, because I feel like now I have the ability to understand when someone is just trying to give me feedback versus something a little bit more personal, and I don't take those things personally anymore. And also I know when to set a boundary for myself and say, I respect your opinion, but I disagree, and it's my life and I want to do it this way. I think it also helps with work, because at work I sometimes am like, I don't want to say critiqued because it's not critiquing, but sometimes they ask me about my process of something, or they'll ask me for, you know, I don't know, just different things. And I think it helps to be able to get a review back, or just really anything in life, and know that it's not anything against you. It's just that they're trying to help. And sometimes people don't know how to do that properly either. Vice versa, it makes it easier to be able to give people critiques in life, because you're able to kind of like give one good thing and one bad thing. So like, I really liked that you did blank, but maybe next time you should also think about doing blank. And that helps me a lot too, especially because people do take things personally, and so it helps so that those people don't take things personally. I hope that makes sense. I'm saying personally a lot. Another thing that I learned was that it's okay to fail, and I think that was hard for me to learn, honestly, because you're constantly like using different media and just trying new techniques, and you don't know everything, and that can be kind of terrifying, especially when you need to make it good for a project presentation or something like that. But it makes me so much more able to do that in life again. So maybe now that I don't have a big studio and all of these tools to work with, I want to try, you know, something new in art, and it gives me the ability to say, okay, let's keep trying this until I really nail it, or know that this is not my thing, I really don't like this and I don't want to try it anymore. It helps me with work as well, where I know how to have this like trial and error kind of situation, and then I can talk to my boss about like, okay, I'm trying this out, I'm gonna run this test, see how it does, and then I'll come back to you with some data. And that's really how I worked in school too. So I think that's really helpful for me. I really love that I learned that process, and I use it all the time. And also, you're just not gonna be perfect at everything. So totally okay to fail as long as you're trying new things and learning from those experiences. I think that's really great. I think two more things that relate specifically to that major was that just to be ready for criticism and prepare yourself for it. So I used to have to mentally prepare myself for critiques. I used to get like very rested the day before and just like try to like really do things that I loved, so I can like give myself some love and love myself. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but then for our critiques lasted, like critiques were scheduled for 3 hours. Our critiques lasted like 12 hours. They were a long time, and 12 hours of being told why you're wrong is really tough. And I don't care if you have like the strongest, I don't know, ability to just like not care. It's really hard to be told for 12 hours why all of your things were wrong and your ideas were wrong and why you're wrong and you're just wrong. So I think preparing yourself for that is a really great way to have a good critique and be able to then take in what people are telling you and use it in the future. And the last one is just to ask questions, and that questions are okay. And I know that we say this all the time, but then people still don't ask questions. And I see this at work all the time, and you know, in school I saw this all the time, and I think it's really okay to ask questions. This kind of goes, again, hand in hand. A lot of these go together, but this goes hand in hand with it's okay to fail. I think, again, as long as you're learning from stuff, then it's totally okay. And asking questions is a great way to say like, okay, I failed at this. I want to ask someone how to do it better next time, or I'm trying something new, and then asking someone, hey, what do you think about what I just tried? I think that really helps a lot. So that's really all I have. Those are just a few things that I learned. I think that some of these things are specific to art majors. I think some of them are specific to school, and some of them are just have like used in life as well. So I hope that that kind of helped. If you're considering an art major, I would say go for it. I do not regret my decision at all personally. I really, really loved my major. I think that although I'm not working in the art industry right now, I think that it really helped me understand things in like my job and life a little bit better, and take things like, for me, just to be able to like function better as a human as well. Just again, critiquing and things like that. Those are really hard things to learn, and it took me 4 years of it, but I learned it. So, yeah, I hope that helped. Thank you for watching. If you want more videos related to what it was like to be an art major, or my major in general, or anything like that, or just art, I guess, let me know and I'd be happy to do those. I'm thinking about doing a few more. So thanks again, and I will see you next time. Bye.